Thank you for being here on this evening. We're not going to bore you. We will hopefully inform you and give you a chance to share questions, feedback, etc. as we continue on the journey. Continue on the journey. We are working diligently in our school system to create a culture of high performance. And I often tell people as I go around the metro area, the state, and the nation, and I just basically say that we are a school system, a community in transformation. We are becoming a high-performing school system. We are on the pathway. Our data will eventually catch up with our actions. But we have decided that all students should have high expectations. Not just a few, but all students. It requires a lot of work. It requires us to leave the status quo mentality. It requires us to really do some self-reflection, some deep thought, and look at our actions to see if our actions are consistent with what we believe, what all students can do. And so you'll see and hopefully learn tonight that our actions are catching up with our belief that all students can achieve high expectations. We've got work that we're working on now, but we've got more work to do. More work to do. So what I like to do is basically share with you that as we become and produce this high-performing school system, currently we're studying. We've got our high-performance various advisories. We're studying what happens within communities that have high-performing school systems around the world, not just within the United States, around the world. And as we study what's happening in high-performing school systems, we're being very introspective and looking at our actions to figure out where are the gaps and the opportunities for us to become more aligned with what high-performing school systems do. And I can assure you that this work is not status quo work. This is not the type work you do when you just, want a school system that has been doing whatever it's been doing and you want to continue whatever you've been doing and getting the same outcomes that you have been getting. This work requires a community to think deeply, to look at its actions, to look at all children, and to ensure that all students have access to high expectations. It doesn't matter what the family income is. It doesn't matter what the race of the family or the student is. It doesn't matter what culture the student may come from. All students, and when you say all students, it means all. And it means that you can't come up with excuses as to why it should not happen for all students. There are a lot of people who are okay with just ensuring that those kids who come from neatly packaged households have access to high expectations. Well, we have decided that that is not good enough for us. You just can't come from a neatly packaged household. When I say neatly packaged, I mean mom and dad have doctorates and lawyers and everybody's educated, and they have high expectations of you, so then we should have high expectations of you. But if you didn't come from that type of household, then we don't have high expectations of you. That is anathema. We will not have that mentality, that mindset in our school system. Why? Because we do believe that the research is clear that whatever level you teach children to, that's the level they what? They rise to. So if you teach them to a low level, they'll rise to a what? If you teach them to a high level, they'll do what? And the only thing that impacts the level that you teach children to would be your expectation. So do we do our children a favor when we have low expectations? Do we do their children, and our children in our schools, one day will have children, won't they? Do we do their children a favor when we teach them to low expectations? Do we do our community a favor when we teach our children to low expectations? Do we do our society a favor when we teach the low expectations? If you want to be a part of part of society that perpetuates lack of opportunity, low expectations, achievement gaps, excuses, then you probably don't want to work in Clayton County right now, because we have decided to do something fundamentally different than what's being done in school systems around the nation. We have looked around, and honestly, we decided that we would create a model and not follow a model, because honestly, we didn't find many models worthy enough for us to follow, because there are so many people who are in status quo thinking. They're not being courageous about all children. They don't want to ruffle the feathers, so to speak. They're okay with these children who appear to meet certain criteria. They're okay with these children getting it and the others not. But the problem with that is these children who appear to be okay to get it, they're always a small what? A small group. While the majority and the masses are not what? So whether we realize it or not, through our actions, we create an unjust and unequal society where you have a few who basically rule over the what? The many, based upon educational levels, based upon job, resources, etc. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't know how long a democracy like that is going to last. Because at some point, if you read history, and all of us should have read history, and you should, if you hadn't, you read history, at some point, the many, they're going to get tired of the what? The few reigning over them, and this is going to be the mantra. Peace for everyone, or peace for what? No one. And I can assure you that if you study history, it's just a matter of time if we don't get it right. Because at some point, people are going to say, enough is what? Enough is enough. And so we have decided that our children are going to be resourced up, prepared so that they can exercise options. Now, whether or not they exercise those options, that would be their what? Their choice. But if they come through our K-12 space, our K-12 educational institution, we should prepare them for options. Options. How many of you believe that your children, and you would expect your children to be prepared for options? Raise your hand. Anything that you expect for your children, you should morally expect it of what? For those of children of others, especially when you have supervisory or leadership capacity over those children. Does that make sense? They may not be your children, but you should lead and interact with those children just like you would your very what? Your very own. You should have high expectations of those children just like you would, and you have high expectations of your very own what? Children. And honestly, if we're not willing to do that, then we're really not worthy to be around our children. Our children deserve that. So we're building a high-performing school system, and I just want you to see, I won't read these to you, but I want you to see that these are the 9 building blocks that we're working on. We're working with our county and state to ensure that our families have support well before the children get to school. That's why we're working on early learning. We need more of our kids in Clayton County in pre-K, and you can put that down. Right now, we serve about 25% of Clayton County's eligible pre-K kids in pre-K. Another 25% are in private providers. 50% of our eligible pre-K kids in Clayton County are sitting where? At home. And now let me put that in perspective. If they're sitting at home, they're not benefiting from systematic instruction for the most part, are they? And so when they get to kindergarten, what is the kindergarten teacher having to do? Teach what level skills? Pre-K. And so what goes lacking in kindergarten? kindergarten skills. And then because you can't hold my baby back, what do we do? We promote them to kindergarten to what grade? So what does first grade teacher have to now teach? While they're trying to also teach, but they only have how many days to do it? And so what happens at the end of those 180 days? They go on to what grade? So what does second grade teacher have to now do? Teach what? And what? And also teach what? And how many days? Did they get more days? Y'all hear what I'm saying? And so we've got to ensure, and when you look at Clayton County's data, you need to look at it with that perspective. We've got a lot of kids who started out with us, and the teachers have been trying to catch them up. So when you start comparing Clayton to certain communities in Cobb and APS, when you look at certain communities, stop comparing. Because you're not comparing apples to what? Apples to apples. See, there are some kids, when they take the GMAS, they're going to do well regardless of the teacher. There are some kids, when they take the GMAS, they won't do well without a good what? Teacher. And you need to know in Clayton County, our children need good teachers. It doesn't mean that all of our kids, no, that's not the case. But be it as it is, they need good teachers. I didn't create the situation as it is. You didn't create the situation as it is. It is what it was. But it is our reality. And if we don't know our reality, then we don't really know how to tell the story. We were discussing today. We were looking at CCRPI scores. And you know me, I'm a little competitive. So I pulled up Atlanta scores. Their overall CCRPI score is higher than ours at the elementary level. But I started drilling down into the subgroups. And guess what I found? The black kids in Clayton County perform higher than the black kids in Atlanta. The socioeconomic disadvantaged kids in Clayton County perform higher than the same group in where? The English language learners perform higher in Clayton than they did. And the only group that they have that we don't really have is the white population. And that white population in Atlanta outperforms all groups to the tune of 90% and higher proficient. And I'm sure we could get access to the income levels of those children. I'll tell you what that is. That's gentrification. So when you all start hearing people compare Clayton to APS and certain other Cobbs and other, you shut that story down. You let them know, wait. You know, sometimes folk are getting credit for doing stuff they hadn't even done. And some of us who are working to add value to the lives of children, we don't give ourselves enough what? Credit. And I want us to change that narrative. We are working in Clayton County. Folks say, oh, why are you not at 80 and 90%? You tell them because we got to get them first to 40%. Because we're working with children who come to school a year and two behind. Why? Because somebody made a decision for whatever reason not to get them in pre-K. And we're trying to change that narrative. So we've got to do a better job, and we're working, and that's why we've got an early learning center we're working to build in our next SPLOS. We've got in the Riverdale area. We got to get more of our kids in pre-K, providing that support before they get to school. Number two, more resources for at-risk students. A litany of things we're doing, and the schools can tell you that. Parents, those of you who feel like you need more resources, I encourage you to have a conversation with your principal about what tools we have in reading, in math, tutorials, etc. There are resources. There are resources available. Of course, having a highly coherent instructional system. We have curriculum, we have assessments, we're working on instruction, and we've got to make sure we balance and we ensure that the rigor of the curriculum and the rigor of the assessment is comparable to the rigor of the instruction. That I piece, that instructional piece, that rigor there is what often varies from classroom to what? You got one teacher over here who's been doing a great job. The rigor is really high, isn't it? Send those kids down the hallway. You may have a colleague, and I know we don't like to say it, but it's the truth. We have a colleague who's teaching a different subject. Those same kids who left a classroom with high rigor, now they got to go and sit in a classroom, and we got to support up, don't we? Support up the rigor. The truth of the matter is we got a lot of inconsistencies. We got some rigorous classrooms, and we've got some classrooms that are not very rigorous. And that also impacts our what? Our outcomes. Number 4, clear gateways for students to get through the system. No dead ends. Number 5, I just alluded to that. High quality teachers, an abundant supply of high quality teachers. I was just looking today as we look at the compensation study phase 2. We were studying our compensation for teachers, the teacher scale, and we were looking at Cobb, Fulton, DeKalb, APS, Fayette, Henry, etc. And I noticed something today as we analyzed it. Cobb County, and you all know a little bit about Cobb, don't you? Cobb County pays teachers more from year 5 to, I want to say, to about year 12, or maybe further along. They value paying teachers more after they've been with them the first few years. So what are they basically saying? You train them up in Clayton, and what are we going to do? We're going to pay them more once they get that experience. So if you don't look at all the data, you don't even realize the system that has been set up. You got some counties who pay them high the first few years, and they pay them high at the last few years. So you got counties who are in the first, second, and third highest performing spot. Guess where Clayton is right now? In none of those spots. None of them on any teacher scale as the highest paying first, second, or third. So again, we set up these systems, and if you don't know how to think systematically, and put the puzzles together, the pieces of the puzzle together, you're trying to solve a problem that is bigger than Clayton. Because Clayton is one system among others in the metro area, isn't it? So in order to really address our problem with a supply of high quality teachers, we got to look and see what are all the impacts. And I can assure you, teacher pay is one of them, but leader quality is another. But that's the work that we're doing. Redesign schools so teachers are treated as professionals, etc. Create a system of career, technology, education, leadership development, and then, of course, governance. Now, all of those 9 building blocks imply some very specific work, and that's what we're studying here in our school system. But I want you to know that this is complex work. This is not the type of work that gets improvement overnight. This is the real deal. And sometimes those of us who are in this work, we don't necessarily explain it to those who are not in the work in such a way that they understand. But our work as educators is to really share what is the work we're working on, what are we working on, and then explain it to the community, involve them in the work so they can really see what's really happening. When I say that this school system is in transformation, it is in transformation. It's in transformation. In all of these areas, we're in transformation. You can go on. Some of these slides I'm going to go through very quickly. We've got our strategic plan, and you know it. We've got our academic goals. We've got our safety and orderly learning environment goal. We've got our engagement goal. We've got our support services. And then that last one, our recruitment retention goals. We have our goals. That's great. Most organizations, worth their salt, should have a plan, should have some type of strategy, strategic plan. We have that. And our actions are aligned to those 5 goals. So what are we doing? What are we doing in our school system? I love the way Dr. Lee took out time to visualize this for us because she put a roadmap in here, but it really speaks to our journey. And every year we're making more and more progress. But I just mentioned number one, ensuring early access to quality resources. Early access for all learners. We've got more to do. We increased the number of kids who are in pre-K, but we've got to get more seats, don't we? But guess what? In order to get more seats, most parents don't know this. Do we get funding for pre-K in our QBE from the QBE? No, you don't. The state doesn't. The Department of Education doesn't fund early learning. Some people think that because they don't know. They fund what grade level instruction? Kindergarten through 12th grade. Where do we get our early learning funding from? From the lottery, and that comes from right from the what? Start. So it depends on how many lottery tickets we buying, doesn't it? And if you're waiting on me, you won't be having anybody in pre-K. Because I never win, so I don't buy them. But again, that speaks to a system, doesn't it? So you got a system that really doesn't see the value of pre-K unless it's through a lottery, funding pre-K unless it's through a lottery process. Because in our Constitution, we only fund K through what? And let me ask you this, is kindergarten required by law? It isn't. And guess what? About 5 to 6% of our kids don't even come to what? Kindergarten. But guess what? When they get to first grade, the teacher has to teach them what grade level? Content. Pre-K, kindergarten, and how many days? So, early access. Number 2, building leader and teacher capacity. That is work. And anybody know, if you ever been a principal, you know that's work. If you ever been anybody who has to support teachers, it's work. Unfortunately, we live in a country that will graduate without teaching them how to read. I don't understand how that happens. So you get an elementary K-5 degree that says you're going to teach elementary kids, which implies you got to teach them what? Reading. But then the colleges don't teach you how to teach what? Reading. Systems. So what do we have to do, principals? We have to train them. At the same time while they're teaching, we got to teach them how to teach reading. Y'all see what I'm saying? See, and see, sometimes the most uninformed people don't understand how all these systems interact with each other. See, some folk, it doesn't matter that the teacher doesn't know how to teach reading, because their children come to school knowing how to what? Read. Why? Because they taught their kids how to what? Read. Just exposure in the informed environment. But there are some, most, who don't have the benefit of that. They count on those of us who are professionals to teach their children how to what? How to read. So think about that, you all. So I'm counting on you to teach my child how to read, but you graduated from a school that didn't teach you how to teach my child how to what? It's like a system that it's not that the teacher doesn't want to, they just earned a degree and that wasn't a part of the process. But what do the parents expect us to do? So we don't make an excuse, we got to teach them how to what? But I want people to understand the systems that are in place that we're working, identifying, and we're working to improve. That's why we got to build leader and teacher capacity. See, if you were in Europe and France, you couldn't teach in France without a master's degree. As a matter of fact, not just a master's degree, but you got to pass a national test to even get on the list to be considered a teacher. See, in America, we don't have those standards that high. But we're a very large nation. They're not as large as we are. So build a leader and teacher capacity. Number 3, using our data. How many of you saw the last report on CCRPI? Most people have no clue as to what that data means. But principals, raise your hand if you have to know what it means. Because you got to not only communicate it, but you got to use that data to inform your decisions, don't you? Yes, you do. You got reading data, don't you? You got math data, don't you? But guess what? Do all we do all day is just reading and math? What about discipline? What about attendance? So while we gotta teach reading and math, I gotta also call you to see why your child's not coming to school. I gotta also call you to tell you your child doesn't know how to sit down. And your child doesn't know how to respect the teacher. Tell me, why do I have to do that for your child? Systems. And you should know, in Clayton County, our data and attendance and discipline is also improving. But the point is this: it doesn't improve unless we're using it and we're implementing strategies to actually improve that. I've heard people saying, even forums like this, oh, I wish our children would behave well. Then why the children so out of control? Now, we didn't raise them. I raised 4, and they weren't out of control. Who raised those children? But be that as it is, when you sit in the school, who has to deal with it? See, and that's why I tell parents, and parenting is important, and pre-K is important, because a child who is at home running amok, y'all know they will. They think they're going to come to school and run away. But you just one child at home. When you come into this classroom, you may be among one of about 28, right? Right. So imagine if just 10% of them run amok. 10% of 28 is just 2.8. That's enough to distract the teacher, isn't it? That's enough to mess with the learning opportunities of the others, isn't it? Yeah. That's why we got to get parents to understand it's important to discipline your children. Socialize them. That's why we want them to come to pre-K, so they can learn early how to adapt in an environment where they're not the only special one. Right. And we all thought our children were special. But you got to also tell them you're special, but when you get in that environment, you got to behave. Why? So the teacher can do what we expect the teacher to do. Using data. Now, number 4, we're advancing learning for all. So what are we doing in Clayton County? Instead of some kids getting access to a rigorous curriculum, we decided to call all kids. Yeah. All kids. All kids. So we're in phase 1 right now. We got more to do, but right now, what's happening in phase 1? At the elementary level, elementary principals, raise your hand. Problem-based learning. Are we doing problem-based learning? Projects. Kids are thinking critically, aren't they? And we believe that if our kids have those type experiences every day for 180 days over 5-6 years, they'll be more ready for high levels of learning as they matriculate to middle school. So now in middle school this year, all of our 6th graders, middle school principals, raise your hand. Are you in here? Don't be. Raise them high. Middle school, all 6th graders are in accelerated math in Clayton County. That means they take all the 6th grade math in 6th grade plus half of 7th grade math. When they get to 7th grade, they'll take the other half of 7th grade math plus all of 8th grade math. And why are we doing that? So when they get to 8th grade, they can take what course? High school algebra 1. Earn credit. Why is taking high school algebra 1 in the 8th grade important? So when they get to high school, they'll have the opportunity to earn up to what level of math in high school? Calculus. Or statistics. Or pre-calculus. Because we know if they go to any post-secondary opportunity, Whether it's a technical school, vocational school, or four-year college or university, what are they going to have to take? They're going to have to take statistics, calculus, probability, and stats, aren't they? So it just seems to me, if we say we're preparing kids for post-secondary options, if you don't expect these kids to be ready to do math, are you really preparing them? Are you really preparing them if you don't expect it? Especially when you know if they go, and even if you don't go to earn a four-year degree, most careers, there's some math problem solving, isn't it? Oh yeah. It's something you gotta do to think critically. And so we're preparing kids. So all sixth graders now are in accelerated math. We'll matriculate through middle school, and starting this year, all ninth graders. You said, oh, we want all of our kids college ready. How do you want all your kids college ready and you don't even expect them to take a college course? You just talking. And you like hearing yourself talk. So we decided in Clayton that we're not going to just what? Talk. So we got about 94% of sixth graders in accelerated math. And for the first time in the history of our county, we expect all ninth graders to take at least one advanced placement and or dual enrollment course. So as of today, while we're sitting here, 80% of our ninth graders are in an advanced placement course. Well, you say, why did you do that? Well, we looked at environmental science regular and environmental science advanced placement side by side. And guess what we noticed? Environmental science is environmental science. So if you're going to learn it in Clayton, why not learn it and get AP credit for it? So when you apply for a college, which looks better? AP looks better all the time. Human geography, another course, right? If you look at human geography regular is the same as human geography. So if you're going to get a course on your transcript, why not just take human geography AP? Well, somebody will say, well, everybody's not going to make a 5. Everybody's not making an 8 now. That ain't the point. The point is to have high expectations for all of them. And guess what? If a student ends up at the end of the year in human geography making a 2 on the AP, the research says that they're still better off if they had not had the experience. But then we looked at our data, you all don't know this, but you should. In human geography, Clayton County was outperforming the state and the world. Did y'all know that? Our data, it was right there in our data. And we partnered with College Board and the National Math Science Initiative. They highlighted that. Did you all know that your students in Clayton County in human geography advanced placement, that your students have been outperforming the state and the world in human geography? See, if we don't know the story, we can't tell it. So it just seems to me that we should expect our students to take advanced placement and or dual enrollment or both. And it's up to them. We've given them some options. We looked at several courses and we worked with College Board to identify courses that we thought a ninth grader who's never had advanced placement would do well in for the first AP course. And we surveyed the students currently, and they responded and said right now they believe they can do it, and that they're more inclined to take more advanced placement courses. Now imagine a school system in urban America with a senior class with 90% or more of your seniors having one or more AP courses on their transcript. Does that not change the narrative? Does that not change what people think about your school system? Why wouldn't we want that for our students? I can assure you there are some communities that have 100% of the kids with 4 or more courses on their AP course on their transcript. You know what those communities have? The expectation that they have, that their kids are going where? You know, and why do you think they have the expectation that their kids are going to college? Because they went where? And they probably know the benefit of going where? They know that if you get a college degree in America, that you have less chances of being what? Unemployed. You got more chances of making more what? Money. And I don't care what y'all say. I don't care who you call upon. When you go to pay that light bill, you need resources, don't you? And guess what? You got to know how the system works. Whether you like the system or not, you got to know how it works. In America, depending on your credentials equate to opportunity. Your credentials equate to higher levels of what? Income. And I know people don't want to hear that, but that's what our children need to hear. You can't be a teacher in America without a college degree. You can't be a doctor without a what? A medical degree. I mean, you could act like one. But I mean a legitimate doctor. And whether you realize it or not, even if you're going to be a certified plumber, a certified welder, you have to get a what? Credential. But the research is clear. Those who have credentials, whenever a credential is required, there is a higher potential for income or higher incomes associated with it. That's why we want all of our ninth graders now to complete a career what? Pathway. So we require advanced placement in career pathways. Somebody said, well, everybody can't do it. Well, we'll let them decide. We won't tell young people what they can't what do. We'll give them the opportunity, support them in that opportunity, and let them come to that conclusion of what? Working with their families, their teachers, and their principals. And that's what we're doing. And that expectation will matriculate with the students as they go from 9th grade to 10th grade to 11th grade to 12th grade. You'll see in the next few years that 9th grade lit, physical science, these will be 8th grade high school credit courses, because we will expect students at some point to take physics, some type of physics, whether it's conceptual physics, calculus-based physics, whatever. We will expect that here in Clayton County. Why? Because if you think that our kids are going to be prepared for the type jobs that exist in the 21st century, and they don't know how to think critically, you are deceiving yourself. We're deceiving ourselves. And the truth of the matter is, the jobs that may exist today for a kid who's in kindergarten, by the time they graduate from high school alone, those jobs may not what? So we've got to give them the skills that they need to figure out and to really, if they have to retool themselves every 5 or 10 years, that they know how to go through the process of retooling themselves. So the work that we're doing today is fundamentally different here in Clayton County. It's different. It can be stressful. It is stressful, but we believe it's the right work for our school system. And lastly, we're engaging all stakeholders. I'm pleased that here in Clayton County that our parents have basically supported the high expectations for all students. I've been in some places where folk will fight against you, but the folk who fought against you were the folk who had children in the high expectations. Oh yeah, I've been in communities where everybody who opposed high expectations for all, the folk who opposed were the folk who had high expectations for their children, but the other children, they can't do it. I don't want them other children in the classroom with my children. I wish somebody would say something like that to me today. Because you think that that's moral and that's right. Something wrong with you. Does that make sense? See, I was one of them Clayton County children. Potential, had the opportunity, but because some adult made a decision not to offer certain things, and I was a child, I didn't know what I was missing. But when I got to college, I realized, oh, some of y'all done had this already. I'm studying all night long, and I'm just like, oh See, that experience grounded me. So as a superintendent, I said, I'm going to make sure all my children get all of those experiences so they won't have the same experience I had when I went to college for the first time.
That's right.
Sitting in classroom with other folk who already had what I'm studying. Y'all hear me? And we know the value of a good education. We made it through. We studied our way through too, didn't we? I want our kids to be prepared. I want them to have options. We want that. So advanced learning is what we're doing. We're engaging our stakeholders. Why? Because we want our kids to be ready for graduation. In that PowerPoint somewhere, our grad rate is improving. Let me talk about that. It's about 72.4%, right? Now, let me give y'all some perspective. Look at your neighbor and say, know your story. Which school system has the highest mobility rate in the state of Georgia? Say it again. Our mobility rate is 32%. That means on any given day, 1 out of 3 of our children are coming or going. Now, where they coming from? Where they going to? Probably the cabs, the Fultons, the APSs. Y'all know what they do, what we do. So, our grad rate has been in the 70s for the last 2 years. We have 11 comprehensive high schools, 1 alternative high school. But listen to this. The alternative high school has a grad rate of about 36%. It's the highest grad rate of all alternative schools in the metro area. And who has the highest mobility rate? Now listen to this. That's the alternative school. They're doing good work over there. We have 11 high schools. Listen to this. Out of 11 high schools, 7 of them have a grad rate above 80%. And the ones in the 80s are getting close to the 90s. 2 of the 7 are at 100%. Now, I don't have a Buckhead community. I don't have a North DeKalb over here. Or we don't have that here in Clayton. So the work is real here. So you got 7 out of 11, 80% grad rate and higher, moving closer to 90. 2 are already at 100%. And the 4 that are in the 70s are getting closer to the 80s. With a mobility rate of what percent? So you mean to tell me that the educators in Clayton County, while kids are coming and going, and y'all know how that disrupts the educational process, but even with all that disruption, we have managed to raise expectations, raise outcomes, raise grad rates, graduate our kids. If we don't know the story, don't expect anybody else to know the story. So y'all should expect in the next few days, y'all saw the CCRP hour release. Y'all know I got a wave of releases coming after that. Because we're going to do what? Tell the story. Because I want the community to know that our leaders and our teachers, they are doing yeoman's work to change the narrative. Yeah, we got areas of improvement. But I don't know of a school system that doesn't have areas that they need to what? Improve. But one thing this community needs to know is that the educators, the leaders and our teachers in this school system, they add value to the lives of our children. Because we don't make excuses what kids can't do, why they can't do it. Oh, I wish they came from this. Listen, we got what we got. And we take them to a higher what? Higher level. Does that make sense? And so I want you all to know that it's a lot going on. And you just got to hang around us to know what's going on. Jada will, I think this is already posted, so they'll post it if you want it. And we'll send it out again. Jada, let's see what's on there. I think I've set it up about data. Yeah. Yeah, we've said enough about that. I've alluded to that. I already talked about discipline. Look at how it's improving. It's on the grab rates I talked about. Strategies, easily stated, but I want y'all to know it's a lot of work behind those strategies. And our principals can tell you, there's a lot of work behind those strategies. You can go on to the next one. Listen to this, advanced placement. A gap between us and the state and global. But look at the improvements. One school went from 35 to 62%. 8.8 to 16%. We are improving. And so as we continue to improve, we will close the gap. And we'll have more kids taking advanced placement. But they will have to meet certain criteria to be allowed to take that advanced placement. But we've got work to do. But the point is, we are doing the work in our school system. So our data is going in the right direction. Even with CCRPI, some of the schools who had a dip this year, those were the schools who were negatively impacted by the tweaking of the calculation last year, because they had major improvement last year. Because the content mastery outcomes didn't change, at least didn't decrease. So we know what's going on. We have to know the story so we can write the narrative. Okay, you can go on to the next one. So this is my charge to you. We got to support the work here. Now, I make no apologies for asking this community to support the work, because this is very hard work, complex work. It requires a level of competence, critical thinking, and that's what our principals, our leaders, our teachers are doing. I want us to continue to brand and to market, tell the story about Clayton. When you go into the community, in the shopping malls, and the grocery stores, let people know the work that's going on. Don't get quiet. We're not that community that you can't make it anywhere else, you just come here. No. Right now, we've got a waiting list of families who want their children to come to school in Clayton. Did you all know we've got families today who have decided they live in other counties, they are paying tuition? I guess I shouldn't call it tuition, whatever you're supposed to call it. But they're paying for their children to come here. Why? Because they see the work that we're doing. And, it's amazing. Sometimes people see, because they're not in it like we are, they're standing on the outside. Sometimes they see what you're doing better than you see what you're doing. And that's what we're experiencing right now. I want us to work to ensure that we support our kids, whether they're instructional extracurricular activities, athletic extracurricular activities, or performing arts. Our kids are doing a phenomenal job. Did you all know that Stillwell students performed the play Amadeus the other day? They did the same play. Those judges gave them a 96 out of 100. So on November 9th, they will be competing at the state level. And I don't know if you saw it, but it was phenomenal. Phenomenal. Those kids did absolutely. You would think that they had been to art, theater school or acting school for 30 years. It was phenomenal. I could see why those judges scored them the way they scored them. And I know that they'll do well on November 9th at the state competition. That is just one example of the great work that our principals and teachers are doing right here in Clayton County Public Schools. Highlight the talent. And lastly, I want us to disassociate ourselves with the myths of dissension and that accreditation. That was 11 years ago. I tell folks, if all you think about is what happened 11 years ago, something wrong with you. I don't care about what happened 11 years ago. I am in today. I'm trying to make my next 11 years a better years. And that's what we're doing here in Clayton County. But we have to be the ones to do that. We have to be the ones. So I'll pause here. I know I said a lot. said a lot to see if you have feedback, questions, and answers. And I want you to share, because we do take your feedback. We do listen. But I have to say this about us, self-included, and I don't say this arrogantly. We do know what we do. These principals know what they're doing. They do. System principals, they know what they're doing. Do we have room for improvement? Of course we do. But just because I need to improve doesn't mean I don't know what I'm doing. We know what we're doing. And we are the best people to work with our children. We what you got today. Oh yeah, we what you got. And these principals and teachers are going to produce the same thing and more that our teachers and principals produced in us.